Hi, I'm Galip. I'm a PM in Tel Aviv. I joined Google almost 2 years ago. Before that, I worked for a few other technology companies. I also worked for a few years as a TV editor. I want to talk to you today about the boundaries of creation and some surprising things I learned over the years. 1988, I'm in 7th grade. My favorite film at that time was The Empire Strikes Back, or maybe E.T. I'm not sure. We have a film day at school. So the whole 7th grade classes are being taken to one of the first cinema complexes in Tel Aviv. We have talks for a few hours, and then at the end of the day, we are being shown a movie. The movie that day was The Princess Bride. Only thing that my class had a fun event just the week before, and we saw The Princess Bride. So we are being taken to one of the smaller halls to see this French film called L'Ami de mon ami. It was translated not very accurately to boyfriends and girlfriends. This is a film, I didn't know it back then, but it's a film by Eric Rohmer, one of the leading directors of the French New Wave of cinema in the 60s. And that day changed my life. I can still remember very, very clearly walking out of that cinema after a new world had just been revealed to me. I mean, cinema could actually talk about real people and real things. You could actually go inside a cinema and observe real human behavior. I remember a lot of the other kids were laughing about how boring the film was and nothing was happening, people were just talking. But for me it was the first in a long series of European films from the 60s and 70s that I went on and watched for a few years. 15 years later, I was working as a software engineer in Sun Microsystems. I was a successful engineer writing Java virtual machines. Successful, but bored. So I decided to leave everything and go and study cinema, looking for creativity. A few years later, I'm already working as a TV editor. The mother of all reality programs, Survivor, is coming to Israel, and I am one of the lucky ones chosen to be part of the editing team. In reality TV, everything happens in the editing room. Now, the first thing I'm almost always asked when people hear that I used to edit Survivor is this real? Did this really happen? And this is a funny question in many ways. One of them being, these people are sitting, they have plastic rocks behind them. And this guy is wearing saber teeth made of plastic. So yeah, it's not exactly real, I'm not sure what that means, but it is real in the sense that they are on a secluded island. They really are starving. So it is really in that sense, but I think that the really interesting question is the story as it is told what happened, what really happened. This is a classic scene from Survivor. These are Nathan and Meir, and they are conspiring. Now, I want to tell you a bit about the process of creating an episode of Survivor. Every episode of Survivor focuses on a period of 48 hours. Now, there are multiple camera teams, and so you receive 150 hours of footage. It takes 3 weeks just to watch it. Anyway, out of these 150 hours, you need to create a story of 25 to 30 minutes. So not everything, of course, is being told, but what actually happens in these 150 hours? Now, you might have seen, you might see two contestants walking out to the jungle looking for coconuts. And they're looking, and looking, and looking. After 3 hours, they manage to find one coconut. Then they take that coconut and they need to walk back to the camp for half an hour. In the camp, they struggle with opening that coconut for 1 hour. So this probably sounds boring, but actually it's not that boring. It could have been edited into a very interesting story about survival on an island and dealing with nature and finding your own food. But Survivor is traditionally about friendships and conspiracies and a story that climaxes in the famous voting scene. On my second or third season of Survivor, I remember a young editor just joined our team. On our second or third day, I remember her running out of the editing room, literally sweating, and she asked me, "This scene that I'm editing now, is this considered a hard scene?" So I told her, there are 3 types of scenes in reality. The first type, you have 2 people talking about a subject, and you need to create a scene about that subject. This is easy. The second type is 2 people talking about a subject, but you need to create a scene where they are talking about a somewhat different subject. This, by the way, is the majority of the scenes. Third type, the really hard ones, is where you need to create a scene of two people talking about a subject, but these two people were never in the same place at the same time. So, what you do in the first days of editing an episode, you ask the assistant editor to run over these 150 hours and create a bank of shots. Bank of shots categorized by the characters that appear in each shot. These are very specific shots. These are only shots of the characters speaking, but they're being shot from the back. Why do we need this? Because when we create that story, we need to fit in a lot of pieces of the puzzle. And sometimes some pieces of the story are missing. Nathan and Mary might have actually been conspiring in the forest somewhere, but it was off camera, so it didn't actually happen. So then I go to that bank, I take this shot of Nathan and Mary speaking maybe about the pizza they ate last month, and I take just sentences and sound bites from all over the season of Survivor and create the scene of Nathan and Mary conspiring. Now, does reality have to be this way? No, it doesn't. I mean, I used to be really frustrated many times about losing all these super interesting stories that exist inside these 150 hours. Really deep stories about psychological things that happen to people. But what the users have, reality has very clear boundaries. Users are used to seeing scenes of people conspiring from the back. Now, I want to take you a few years back to my first year in cinema school, first semester, first assignment ever, a documentary assignment. We needed to shoot a short documentary film that contained contradiction. Contradiction is the tool of documentary. A documentary always has some kind of contradiction. If you're watching a crime detective documentary, then there's a contradiction between what really happened somewhere in the dark and what we really know. This gap is what keeps us interested. If you're watching a National Geographic film about the Galapagos Islands, then there are strange birds and strange animals and jungles. And this contradicts with the concrete building in which you're living and the coffee shop just next to your house. Okay, now I had myself. The Tel Aviv municipality has a special team. That team goes around the city and gives fines to dog owners who do not clean after their dogs. The name of the team is the Green Commando. On the right, you see Zion. He is the commander of the Green Commando, and he's very concerned with the way the Green Commando is conceived. So he made sure they had these army pants and army boots, and of course, he chose the name, the Green Commando. Now, the Green Commando take themselves very seriously. They actually do hideouts. They took me to a hideout. They are hiding out in the bushes in the park. Where they have a view of all the park, and they can actually see dogs pooping from the So I had my contradiction: dog poop and the Green Commando. Now, when you go out shooting a documentary, you don't just go out shooting. You do research before. And the most important part of the research is talking to the people you are going to interview and understanding what they're going to say, because the shooting day has a very tight schedule. You have a few minutes to talk to them, and you need to know exactly what you want that person to say. Now, Zion was a great interview. He was super enthusiastic, super into what he was doing, and there was one sentence that kept coming again and again. He said, "The Green Commando is not a poop commando." Okay, now I knew that this sentence would be a key sentence in my film. It really encapsulates everything. Okay, so Zion is easy. He's a perfect interviewer. It's really easy. We start the shooting day. We start schedule 8 a.m. interview with Zion. And then I learned the first and most important lesson in documentary filmmaking. When the camera turns on, people change. Zion stopped being enthusiastic. Zion was sitting like this and talking very, very officially. Now I'm in my first shooting assignment ever. I'm already talking to Zion for 20 minutes, and I can't use even one sentence he's saying. And obviously, I can't get him to say the Green Commando is not a poop commando. Already 20 minutes have passed, the day is going, and I'm failing. And thoughts are running through my head, and then I have an idea. And I say, Zion, can you say the Green Commando is not a poop commando? And then Zion just sits there and says, the Green Commando is not a poop commando. So I say, no. Zion, enthusiastically. So he says, the Green Commando is not a poop commando. Bingo. I have my sentence. That's it. Now, was I manipulating Tzion, or was I actually helping the real Tzion just come out on camera? I don't know. But this is the way that most documentaries you saw. These are the methods that are being used. Now, could documentary be done in any different way? Yes, but very rarely it is, because these are the boundaries of documentary. We are used to seeing in documentaries interesting, sometimes very complex people summarized into short, precise, perfect sentences. Now, let's talk about realistic dramas. What about realistic dramas? This is a shot from Monsters Ball from 2001. She's a widow, a poor widow from Georgia, and we can all agree this is kind of realistic. You see the old couch, the torn down shades in the back, her cheap clothes, kind of a realistic scene. But I want to look a bit more on the details. Do you notice that diagonal light on the wall on the back, just behind her head? There's a special light doing that nice diagonal light. The way the light is falling on the couch, creating these unpleasant shadows just from above, there's a specific light for that. The way the light falls perfectly just on the middle line of her right shoulder, this is not a coincidence. And the glitter in her eyes, there's a special glitter light. Small light that doesn't really do any light, it just reflects in her eyes and creates that glitter. And do you see where she's sitting? In the middle of the frame? This is not a coincidence either. Another thing, I mean, poor widows from Georgia usually don't look like Halle Berry, and they almost never get paid $15 million to sit on couches. But this is how we got used to see a realistic scene. Now, could realistic cinema be shot any differently? Well, actually, yes. These are shots from the 1988 film, a short film about killing. This is a Polish film shot during the last days of communism in Poland. It won the jury prize in Cannes Film Festival and helped make Krzysztof Kieślowski one of the most acclaimed directors of art house cinema in the 90s. But I don't want to talk about Kieślowski, I want to talk about Sławomir Idzak, his cinematographer. Now in 2007, I was in the Berlin Film Festival, just a few blocks from here, hearing a talk from Sławomir Idzak. He was talking to us young filmmakers. And he told us about how this film came into being. When he got the script, it's a really brutal and violent film, and he was really disgusted with the script, and he wasn't even sure he wanted to do it. He was talking to Kieślowski. Eventually, he agreed on one term, that he can do whatever he wants, total artistic freedom, no questions asked. Kieślowski agreed. They went on shooting the film. What Idzak did to convey that feeling of disgust is he went to a special manufacturer in Poland that created custom green filters with strange diagonal lines across the filters, creating a very strange feeling. Now, back in these days, you couldn't see what you were shooting. You needed to send the film to the lab, and only after 2 or 3 days you could actually see what you were shooting. So after a few days, Kieślowski and Idzak went to the screening room, and they looked at what they just shot, and Kieślowski is kind of shocked, and he tells Idzak, I'm not sure what exactly you did here. I'm not exactly sure this is even usable, but we had an agreement, and if you want to shoot this green shit, it's your problem. Now, why am I telling you about this strange Polish cinematographer? A short film about killing came to be known as a breakthrough in modern cinematography. Sławomir Idzak won numerous prizes for his works with Kieślowski. He became known as one of the leading cinematographers in the world, and of course he was invited to Hollywood. That talk in 2007 was only a few days after the premiere of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which Idzak shot. Now, Idzak was very, very frustrated during that talk because when he shot a short film about killing in Poland, he was making a few hundreds of dollars. For the Harry Potter film, he was making much more. But he was now limited to the boundaries of realistic cinema. And he could no longer do that green shit that actually brought him to where he was. This is how it looks like if you want to shoot a realistic shot of a run-down room. All these lights. A Hollywood film can be a multi-billion-dollar business. This is a very hard-to-move ship. By the way, these lights cost ridiculous amounts of money, and you're actually looking at one of the barriers to entry of Hollywood. But this is subject for a different talk. I was talking about the language of cinema, and mainly about the tools of shooting and editing, but I could have told a similar story about any other aspect of filmmaking. I could have told a story about script writing. I could have told a story about makeup. I eventually left the world of cinema and television because I realized that today creativity exists elsewhere. I left technology to go to cinema school and look for creativity. I ended up returning to this world that is still in creation. And I think we all have a Poland. Maybe it's a startup from 2 years ago. Maybe it's a school project from 20 years ago that is still close to our hearts. I mean, we're all creatives. We all have ideas, and we have this great opportunity to be creating this new world, inventing new languages, creating the rules. Let's use this opportunity. Let's not forget our time back in Poland. Thank you.